All right, hello. My name is Kim Nelson. I'm from Aarhus University in Denmark. I'd like to present a small aspect of my PhD dissertation that I recently finished, submitted, done, title, done. But this is just a minor bit of it. Thank you. Yes, and it's going to be related to, so my PhD research was about investigating the potential of actually finding Pleistocene archaeology in Scandinavia, because we don't really have any. But this particular presentation will be more about how I try to evaluate the research history and how it may have impacted the reasons why we don't have this archaeology today. So the Neanderthal range is usually considered to approximately take up this space. So as you can see, Scandinavia is not included in the Neanderthal range. Of course, this is based on archaeology, so the range is a representation of this. So the question is that I will try to investigate today is the absence of Neanderthal evidence in southern Scandinavia a result of actual hominin dispersal or more related to research questions, research history? Actually, when you look into the research history of Scandinavia and specifically southern Scandinavia, we do actually have finds that have been historically represented and announced as Neanderthal or pre-modern human sites. And as you can see, there are quite a lot. They're all highly controversial today. And many of them have also been excluded or now been given a post or early Holocene age or something like that. But we still have a few left that some people are inclined to denote as a Pleistocene site. But they're all they don't have context, so we cannot date them. They're all surface finds that look like hand axes, and as you can see, you have some examples of the hand axe-like looking artifacts up here. And I'll give you a brief example concerning this specific find. It's in Denmark. It's called the Villestrup hand axe. It was found here. It was found in 1931 by a small girl. So the account of the find, of how it was found, that's pretty much what we know. But at least it was found on the surface, so it was not in any type of context. And later on, a very renowned Danish collector of archaeological material bought it through a long history. It had ended up many places. But he recognized that it looked like a hand axe, and he decided to compare it to a lot of the French material. He also had other finds that he assumed to be of really old age. And he was an autodidact. He was not a professional archaeologist, but he was very interested in it. And he had a very large collection and his own museum in his house, and he was very active in the 60s. So he contacted a French specialist and made him look at some of his material, and specifically the Villestrup hand axe was convincing also for the French specialist archaeologist. So he got the Danish newspapers, he convinced them to publish this very interesting find, because this was a sensation. We finally had the proof of Neanderthals in Denmark based on this tool, and of course, based on comparison with a similar tool found in a secure context, and with the trump that a French specialist had stressed the authenticity and genuine artifact feature of this piece. And as you can see, this nice representation of a Neanderthal on the side. Mm-hmm. So this came out in the newspapers. In several newspapers, this was just one of them, and they were all cover stories with these reconstructions of Neanderthals next to them. The next day, this was counter-argued by archaeologists, a professional archaeologist, and P.V. Glob is a very famous and renowned archaeologist in Denmark. He was the leader of the National Museum, so he was well known and had a lot of authority on this. So he wrote this counter-argument the day after, saying there are some problems here. And I've only translated the title, but it says the flying saucers of archaeology. And he compares these single find hand axes to the flying saucers, because Denmark is extremely rich on flint. We have erratic flint everywhere, and we have a lot of geofacts. But not only do we have that, we also have a lot of preforms, so unfinished pieces that were not meant to be a hand axe, but maybe a sickle or something. And they can very easily look like a hand axe if they are thrown away because maybe a fault in the flint is found, and it's decided not to finish the piece. And we have a lot of examples of these, especially from these Neolithic flint mines where you have really flint workshops where it's a production of a lot of sickles and etc. So he was not convinced by this find. That is the basis, the basic conclusion of this. But he's also saying it in a very rough way, let's put it that. And also saying that, we cannot trust the autodidacts because they don't know about this context. And also saying that, okay, maybe a French specialist said that it was real hand axe, but he didn't know that there was no context. He didn't know that this Danish situation where we have a lot of flint and preforms and geofacts. So this then turned into a dispute between the professional archaeologist and the amateur archaeologist. And it became these two main characters became the personifications of these two entities. And of course that that escalated further into a very personal dispute between these two characters. And at some point also Peter Glob is really explicitly calling Eli Jepsen, who was the other main character, a dilettante. And it really turns personal. And there are many newspaper articles on this. I just chose a few for examples. So the title here says, Hanningman, that's Eli Jepsen, the amateur, believes Professor Glob is wrong. This is the translation of this. And Eli Jepsen fighting for his evidence. This is the title of this. So it extends actually over almost 5 years in total in the newspapers. So it becomes a very public affair, and actually in the newspapers it becomes such a normal thing to have occurring all the time, this debate, that poems and songs are made about this dispute, and also satirical cartoons, also with a small satirical poem about this dispute. So it really becomes a big thing. This is not the only example of this. Actually, this mainly concerns the Wilstrup hand axe, but it actually occurs on several occasions with different finds between different professional and different amateurs. So this one is a case about another site. It's called Bijstrup, and this is a letter from an amateur archaeologist to a newspaper where he actually calls an archaeologist, Søren Andersen, a sissy, saying that because he excavated a site that was originally assumed to be possibly very old. But then they did further excavation and found out that the date was wrong, the initial date was wrong, so it was Holocene. So they didn't want to announce it as a Pleistocene site. But it was never formally published, and this is why the amateurs are angry, because it was never published. So this dispute just continues over several years, but also in very many different sites. So from looking at the research history, it's clear that we have a sort of recurrent trajectory where a new site is announced often by amateurs, saying that this first Danish people and sensation rhetoric are being used. Then it turns into a dispute between who has the right to make interpretations about these sites, and when they're potentially this sensational, which then actually in every occasion turns into a very personal dispute where people are calling each other names in a very unprofessional manner, but primarily in the newspapers. This is all happening in the newspapers and in the public media. But this creates this foundation that there's little scholarly consensus among archaeologists also, and there's no willingness to be part of this debate because it really turns negative. So how can we maybe more formally evaluate how much the research history has actually influenced the current situation in Scandinavia? Can this debate structure be further elucidated by means of more formal approaches such as network analysis? And this is something I've tried to do with the case of Scandinavia, where I use citations in publications as a proxy for research behavior and interaction. And this was a way to try and more quantify the interaction between the main characters in the debate. And I'm also including newspaper articles. I had, because Denmark is a relatively small case study, I could actually include all the newspaper and articles that talk about Pleistocene archaeology. And of course then all their citations. And I added attributes for all of the primary articles dealing specifically with Scandinavian ideas of Pleistocene archaeology. And these are the attributes that I will now show you in these network graphs. This is just to show you that this is how the data looks. So this is a node table and this is an edge table. It's extremely simple to do, and it's an open software called Gephi that you can download online, and it's extremely easy to use. So this is the entire network graph without any filtering, and as you can see, and the color is actually arbitrary. The nodes, the larger the nodes, the more they are cited. But what is visible here is that we have 3 main author clusters here, which actually corresponds with regional areas. So this is Norway and Sweden up here, this is Denmark, and this is Finland. What this shows is actually that we have a very national debate. If we continue to try and elucidate some more of the patterns, now all the secondary, so all the, now I filtered it, so it's only the primary articles and how they relate to each other for simplicity to see how they're actually interacting. So the colors now represent the publication year. So as you can see, the blue ones are the early publications, so from 1901 to 1950. And again, the next 50 years and the next 50 years. Well, it's not 50 years because we're in it right now, but until 2015. But it's clear that we have the early articles here, so the publications, the debate is going on, and then it shifts to Denmark. And today, there's only articles being published about the Finnish case and mostly Susulaya Cave, which is the only active debate today. So there's nothing really being published today, except a few. You see a few green ones, but that's a clear pattern at least. If we look at the role that the main author has in the debate, the green one shows that the article is a pro-argument saying that Pleistocene archaeology was present. So we have Neanderthals, for example, in Scandinavia. Whereas the red is the opposite. They're at least critical towards this hypothesis. And the blue ones are reviews, but they're not really visible in this slide. But as you can see, the ones that are cited the most are actually the pro-arguments. And the last one is the status of the main author. This shows you if the main author is a professional in his field or in her field. That could be archaeology, but also some of them are geologists, or amateurs. And as you can see, most of them are, of course, published by professionals, except for the cases here. This is the Danish case still, the author clusters in Denmark. And here you have these relatively well-cited ones, also from the autodidacts or the amateurs. And this is, for example, one of the examples, the Willestrup example that I gave you before. But this is the only place where we actually have the amateurs being cited this much. So, the conclusion with this small case study was that we can see, at least in the Scandinavian case, that we have a very close national debate where people are not actually interacting very much across even the regional areas of Scandinavia. A clear temporal spatial shift in the debate each 50 years or so, and a reference bias towards pro-arguments, and an overweight of publications by professional archaeologists, which is not really weird, but the few that are published by amateurs in Denmark are relatively well cited. So, the implications of this, research history has generated, a baseline among Scandinavian archaeologists today that actually pre-modern humans did not venture this far north. But there has been little integration in the international debate. And also in the last 50 years, no one has actually been discussing it in Scandinavia except for the Finnish case. So it is completely dead. And also, Pleistocene archaeology is not part of this, well, at least the Danish, I'm not sure in Norway and Sweden, I must say. But in the Danish archaeological legislation, that means that we only go to the top level. Nothing is being looked at. I mean, they can dig away the entire Pleistocene if they want. Maybe the geologists are called out, or faunal expert. But archaeological-wise, this is not part of the legislation because it has been, on the top level, decided that this will not be there anyway. So the main point is just, if you don't look, you do not find. So let's change this, but that'll be for the future. Thank you. I'm from Aarhus University in Denmark. I'd like to present a small aspect of my PhD dissertation that I recently finished, submitted, done, title, done. But this is just a minor bit of it. Thank you. That have been historically represented and announced as Neanderthal or pre-modern human sites. And as you can see, there are quite a lot. They're all highly controversial today. And many of them have also been excluded or now been given a post or early Holocene age or something like that. But we still have a few left that some people are inclined to denote as a Pleistocene site. But they're all they don't have context, so we cannot date them. They're all surface finds. You can see Scandinavia is not included in the Neanderthal range. Of course, this is based on archaeology, so. The range is a representation of this. So the question is that I will try to investigate today is the absence of Neanderthal evidence in southern Scandinavia a result of actual hominin dispersal or more related to research questions, research history? Actually, when you look into the research history of Scandinavia and specifically southern Scandinavia, we do actually have finds. Yes, and it's going to be related to, so my PhD research was about investigating the potential of actually finding Pleistocene archaeology in Scandinavia, because we don't really have any. But this particular presentation will be more about how I try to evaluate the research history and how it may have impacted the reasons why we don't have this archaeology today. So the Neanderthal range is usually considered to approximately take up this space. So it's lines that look like hand axes, and as you can see, you have some examples of the hand axe-like looking artifacts up here. And I'll give you a brief example concerning this specific find. It's in Denmark. It's called the Villestrup hand axe. It was found here. It was found in 1931 by a small girl. So the account of the find of how it was found that's pretty much what we know.